Okay, here we go. We have four-time Canadian fiction author Kamilah Haywood, also known as KWoodz. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I can't complain at all. Another day back at it. You know how it goes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for coming by to the Lens of Yashu, like for the very first time. I've been like checking out like the work so far too, with the Hidden Track, with Diamond in the Rough, and also with Concrete Jungle 2. And like, I actually wanted to find like Diamond in the Rough part one, but I don't think it was on like Amazon for a bit too. So I only had like Diamond in the Rough like part two. But like, it kind of seems like interesting like from the stories that like you tend to cover, with the prison system, with prostitution, with gang violence initiation, with socio-economic status and life, and like even like having that with the Kutch show too. Like it's like very dope to see and hear as well from like what I've like analyzed so far.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And it's definitely something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm glad to be able to do it and start these projects and kind of execute them.
Yeah. No doubt. And I want to get like into your story like for the very first time. So you grew up in Toronto, that's correct?
No, actually, I grew up in Saga. I grew up in Ridgeway, Mississauga. Yeah.
All right. And so growing up in like Ridgeway in Mississauga, like what was it like for you growing up? Would you say that you had a good experience growing up, or would it be like very different?
Um, honestly coming from a single parent West Indian household. Um, I guess and being in a what do you call it? It was the first housing in Mississauga, and everybody kind of flocked from the Toronto communities to this first housing. So you ended up having a lot of West Indian families, and a lot of them were single parent households. So us as young kids, we ended up getting into, our moms were at work, and we ended up getting into a whole heap of shit. So that was kind of my experience. My mom was at work a lot, and they didn't have, back then, they didn't really have like, in Toronto, they have all these programs for youth and at-risk youth. They have drop-ins, they have these art programs, all these things. Well, we didn't have any of that. We had the corner store, we had the little grocery store, and we had the church, and we weren't attending the church. So we got up into everything. Yeah.
No doubt. So, like in that sense, with Mississauga, so it's kind of like very different, just with, like as you said, like with the programming, with like isolating, people from certain like economic statuses and like
Right.
ways of life, than like with the actual area. Because like with Mississauga, you get like those whole like nice parts, the condos.
Suburbs. They have the suburbs that, like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. We were like this community that was kind of marginalized in Ridgeway, and then around Ridgeway, you have like all these rich houses. So, and the white community, the suburbs, like all the white people that were right around us. And then when we would go to high school, you had the, I don't really want to say like trailer park, but you had the lower income white kids that went to high school with us that were also getting themselves into trouble. So that's kind of just how we grew. We learned, not really positive ways of surviving. And then we just ended up getting into a whole heap of shit and problems and trouble. And then it just kind of continued and continued and continued, where you branched out and you went to different, you ended up in Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. And like during that time, this is like I guess like in the like early
Early teens, like 14, 15, around there.
uh
Yeah.
so like around like the early like 90s, mid 90s,
Yeah.
2000s. Oh,
Early
true.
90s. Yep. Early 90s. I'll say like probably like 1994, 95.
True,
And then,
true.
by the time you hit like uh 1998, 99, you're locked up in prison. Because that's where it kind of led you. So yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting too. Like I just want to like dive in. So Mississauga like now versus like back then. So would you say that Mississauga now is like still the same as it was like back in the 90s? Like aside from like the whole like condo rises, gentrification, or would you say it was like still like a bit different like in that sense?
It was a lot worse back then because, you know, the police, Peel police, they were present. I'll definitely say they were present, but they weren't as present as they are now. Like they caught on, you know what I mean? Whereas back then we were wild, loose cannons. They didn't really understand that this was what was happening. You know what I mean? There was, you know, little gangs going on and everybody was trying to claim the areas and whatever, but they didn't realize what was happening. So they were starting to have presence. There were shootings and, you know, all these kind of things happening, but they didn't really understand to the effect until, you know, like now they're starting to see like these gangs came up, but these gangs were starting from the 90s in those ends. You know what I mean? So it's the same like way back in the Toronto when the 80s, these gangs were happening, but now they're aware, you know what I mean? Whereas then it was the 90s that these things were happening and it built up, you know? So they didn't realize these things were happening. And it's now when you're in the news and in the media, you're seeing they're talking about these things now, but it took them how many years to realize that the foundation was from the 90s.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting too, because like with me, like I never really analyzed, you know, Mississauga to be like that, you know, within like a certain like within that perspective, because you know, like growing up, like I lived in like, you know, being in Toronto, like I always thought like Mississauga was sort of like more nice than like Toronto, you know, based on like the areas provided and, you know, other ends that would usually tend to be, but like just like reading it from like the Concrete Jungle book and also just like reading like the news, it's very like interesting, like in that sense too, like how
Spread
there are
out.
still issues going on. Yeah.
It spread out. It spread out in the GTA. It spread out. It's like it spread out east. It spread out. It kind of started in the core of Toronto, but it spread out because people moved out and then came and, you know, spread out the stuff.
Yeah.
It just went to other areas.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. I want to get into your part where you know you decided to become like a writer in a podcast. So like what made you decide on becoming like those parts? Like was there ever anything that like led you to getting into writing like as like a kid or as someone like older in that sense?
Well, I guess from my perspective, I feel like as an artist, you always have this passion, this gift that kind of finds you. And I know like from I was like 12 years old, I was always, you know, writing poetry, writing raps, whatever, but I kind of lost my way with it. And then you know, I ended up going away, whatever, away to prison. And then I came out and it kind of found me again. And it just kept following me. Like, and I just was like ignoring it for the longest time. And then eventually I was like, you know what? Let me try and write this book because I had this book that was just in my head. And I was like, let me write it. So and I started to write it. And then it took me a couple years. And then I released the first book.
No doubt. And how did the show come about? Like the Kutch show come about? And
Chuuch Live
like
Show? Chuuch
yeah,
Live
yeah.
Show? Well, it was me and Amanda, and the whole pandemic hit, and we realized that, you know, everybody was on lockdown, and, you know, a lot of small businesses, artists, everybody was like, what the hell had just happened? Like everybody went on lockdown. People weren't able to talk about like weren't able to express their music, and a lot of people had a really opposing political views on what was happening, you know, if it was a pandemic or a plandemic, all these type of things. So we decided, you know, instead of church, we called it Chuuch, and to give people a voice, you know, where they could come on and they could talk about, you know, their entrepreneurships, their artistry, but also talk about the political views of what this pandemic was doing to people's mental health, addiction, all these kind of things. So we started the show together, and eventually Amanda's in the background more so of it now, and I just continued on with hosting.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know, like just seeing like the unique guests like come there. Like only had to watch like maybe like 3 episodes so far, like more of the studio-based ones. So like you had
Yeah.
Nanna Goodie as like a host, you had RUNXGUN like as like guests, you had like Badass like Buck. How did
Yeah.
you manage to like reach out to them? Like just how did you get to like know them like for a bit more, like even like for the podcast and like even like now?
And they're in my network. I've known RUNXGUN, one of the members I grew up with, And Nanna, same. She's from same area, so I've known her for a good while. She's in the network as well. And Buck, the same thing. She's in the network as well. So, they say your network is your net worth. And I find that, the more you expand and work well with people, the more you kind of, each one teach one, help one, grow one. So everybody's kind of just trying to work together to kind of help build the city up in a good way. And that's kind of like how I look at the motto for Chuuch Live Show. Like, if we can help each other, and if you need help with something, I can help you with something, then that's just kind of how I'm trying to do it.
Yeah, no, it's like definitely like very interesting too. And do you feel like more podcasts like the Cut Show should come like this, like in that sense too, like for like, just like not even like Mississauga, but like for like everywhere, like around, because you don't see like a lot of like women like led podcasts like as much like in the city of Toronto or like even in the GT as well. So do you feel like there should be like more of a rise like that?
Most definitely. And even just in general, like what you're like, how you have the vlog, what you're doing, I think is absolutely amazing. And I think we need to have more of these conversations. Like, I don't know if you remember back in the 90s, like they had Rap City, they had The Basement, like they had all these, even though they were shows, but it was amazing to have these conversations where everybody was just kind of like out there supporting each other's work, supporting what everybody was doing. And I don't know where that momentum got lost, but we need to get back to that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely know what you mean too. And like, I think even like with media as well too, like, I don't know if you know recently that Flow 93.5 will come to an end since CINA Radio Group has bought the rights to them, and like it'll be placed in the G98.7 FM channel.
I was very, very sad and disappointing to see that. I was just like, what are we even going to be listening to? Like, do we even still have the culture that's going to be on the radio, or are we just going to be listening to like pop? Because all the authenticity from those radio stations have completely been wiped out. If they doing this, like 98.7 was like, to me, the like last standing, maybe like with 105.5 that's still trying to hold on. And Tuesday mornings with what's his name there, I think it's 89.5, and they still have that hip-hop show, but there's barely anything on the radio station that's like culture to hip-hop and R&B and reggae. It's like so diluted.
I definitely like know what you mean too in that sense too. And like even like within this concept of like shows and programs and like what you have and like what I have.
Yeah, like I do. What do we have on television? Nothing. Like there's no hip. Like if you look at the States and you look at the UK, there's no content that's Canadian content other than big up the Nemesis right now who's doing Push. And he's trying to create a Canadian content of, Toronto realness, raw and explicit that can kind of like actually speak to our culture. Like, where do we find this? Because there's nothing.
Yeah. And I do feel like there are like certain programs that are trying to work out too. And then like there are other ones that might be like sort of like only for within like a certain group. Like, sometimes too, there's, We Love Hip Hop, Six Buzz, and other like big platforms. Yeah. But I do feel like they do like only work with like artists like within like that range too. So like having someone of a certain range that can open up to like everyone, like I do feel like that could like work out too in that sense too. And like, with your show and with other shows that come about, I do feel like these are ones that will be accessible like for everyone to talk about, like not just like only within hip-hop, but like with other like cultures as well, like in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with that. And I feel like there's a timing right now. I know like with certain fundings and grants and different meetings and interviews that I've been in, it's like there's a calling for that. Like they're calling for the expansion because they realize that, I don't know if it's the Canadian market, I don't know if it's the art industry, I'm not sure what it is, but they're realizing that it's being highly diluted and people are losing interest.
Yeah. No doubt. And I think we could like talk about this like all day too, but like we'll speak about it like later on for a bit too. But like getting back into your content as well too. So you recently released this book, The Hidden Track. So I'll give it like maybe like a little summary. So it's basically about a young girl that gets caught up in the whole like prostitution field, you know, from meeting up with someone that is like a family friend of hers that like led her on to the industry through certain like cues. I don't want to give it like all the way to it. I think people would have to purchase it, so I'll send like the links later on. But what inspired you to create this book?
Well, honestly, like I had both of my nieces go to university, and one of my nieces said to me that she was going to UTM. And there was a group of women, Asian women to be exact, and they were recruiting women to join this church group, but it was actually an alias for basically getting them involved in prostitution. And they even were like pushing around like this baby in the carriage and all this kind of shit. Anyway, I started to do like more research about it because I started to hear like the Halton Hills was getting heavy with it. I started to like, anyway, there's a big culture. It's $1 billion industry that is going on right now, globally, and probably trillion. I don't even think billion is the accurate number. It's probably $1 trillion industry that's going on right now in the world, globally. And I felt there's a lot of females, males, and probably even trans that are underage that are getting pushed into the life of prostitution from a young age. And I felt, you know what, this not really being told as a Canadian story too tough. And I also realized that the more research that I did, that North Preston, they were calling them a gang, which is bullshit, they're a family. And they were stating that they were a big Canadian problem of this. And for me, I was like, how does that make sense when this is a 4,000 community of 4,000 people? And prior to that, they were like slaves that escaped to the free land of North Preston. But you guys are labeling them as this big Canadian thug gang that leads the prostitution in Canada. How's that fucking possible? So for me, like the more and more I started to do research, I wanted to tell a humanizing story of how, the prey, North Preston, became the predator. And I really was like, you guys the colonizers love to set us up as always being, the predators. And we're always, Black people were always have a target on our back. And I wanted to change that narrative by telling the story.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like interesting too. And like from what I've realized, like in the news and people who are caught up on that, like like usually within this whole like prostitution field, like even in Canada, it's not women like in the city, like in Toronto, that are usually doing it as much. Like the recruiting girls from out of the city, out of like the province, even just like out of like other areas too. And they share like these like documentaries of their experiences, and in a sense too, like it's either humanizing or dehumanizing in their sense too, like based on their experiences. And just even like within groups, as you said too, like with North Preston's Finest, they even like document this like on this like documentary called like North Preston, like I think North Preston. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think it's fair, like, you know what I mean, for this community to be targeted. And I also don't think it's fair for them not to tell there's a beauty in that community. There's so much love in that community. There's artists that have come from that community, and there's a real tale that's come from that community. So if you've put a community and marginalized them and left them with nothing, and they've chosen to survive, and there's many of them that are hardworking people, this, that, the third, but you've chosen to target maybe one or two people that have made it out of the community by any means necessary. How are you globally targeting them when there's lawyers, doctors, people that are globally supporting this community that you're not targeting at all?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we kind of do have to like look into the people that get like within this like problem. So like usually like even like the government too, that kind of like fails to kind of like help out like these certain communities too, even like with First Nations communities, like within like Canada too, like even like with the water problem, like that's like one major problem, even with North Preston, like isolating them in that area where they still get to experience like racism, like in a certain sense too. Like that's also a problem too. And we can
It's
even
even
go we can even go with like back home too, like within Toronto, within Mississauga, like isolating certain people in certain areas, like in Ridgeway and Mississauga, in like moving people from like Regent Park, from Parkdale to like other areas, like even like Jane and Finch too, all the way to like Brampton or to like
yep.
Scarborough, like in Vito areas too. So it's not really just a nation, like a specific area problem. This is happening like all over like Canada,
Over the
like in that
place.
sense too. So
That's true. And even to take it when you're talking about the indigenous and the problem with the women that have just been missing for how long? Like it's still happening. These women are just gone missing. I remember at one point they had the pig farm where this man had how many women buried. Then you had Bruce MacArthur that was in the gay community killing off all these people. Like, you guys are not talking about these people, but you want to attack anytime it's Black you or it's indigenous, you want to be attacking. To me, that's a huge issue. And I feel like this is why, I've started to, like, I started with the stories, but the more that I'm getting into my writing, the more I realize that I want to address these social issues so that readers that may have not experienced these stories or don't know anybody that have experienced these stories start to open their mind and realize that these are issues, and to look at it from a different perspective than what the media, than what the news, than what the government is spreading is false propaganda. It's bullshit.
yeah, no doubt. And just like even like explaining like all these books too, like with Diamond in the Rough, Concrete Jungle, Hidden Track, that even deal with these like issues too. Like, did you felt like those books you wrote relate to your life like in some sort of way? Like, I know you talked about like being like in the prison system for a bit too, and like even like growing up in Mississauga. So I don't know if those are like other like indicators like in that sense too.
Yes, definitely. It, like I said, I believe with every author, there's always some type of truth to the story, whether it's people they've grown up with, whether it's a part of their own experience, or even people they've witnessed in their life. I think that obviously makes the story a little bit more compelling in some way, shape, and form. But no, they're definitely not one my stories, obviously, but it there is obviously some type of truth in it in some way, shape, and form. Yeah.
No doubt. So like in even like in your experience too, like I know that you talked about like being like in the system for a bit too. So like what problems did you ever like notice, or even like from the experience of others, like that you noticed like in the criminal justice system, and even with various subtopics like gang violence, prostitution, like mistreatment of inmates and such like that?
Well, in the prison system, there is just in especially now it's completely inhumane. They're treating you from the pandemic, prior to the pandemic. The system is there is no justice. That's the number one. Big up to one of my comrades. So he'll be who that's his line. There is no justice. It's injustice, and really and truly, now at this point, because we're in this bullshit pandemic, they're basically treating these prisoners like animals, cattle. They have no clue about mental health. Um, Really and truly, in my mind, this system should be abolished, but we're far from abolishment. But there's a lot of advocacy groups. One that I'm a part of, Toronto Prison Rights Project. FU is another organization that's trying to combat this as well. But these are groups that are out there that are trying to advocate for the rights of these prisoners, because they have no clue about mental health. Like these correctional officers, in Canada, you're not supposed to have an inmate in the solitary confinement for more than 15 days. We're hearing these prisoners that are crying out, talking about, 4 to 6 months to a year now because of this pandemic. People are sitting in solitary confinement mixed with other, prisoners that have COVID, medical injuries, all kind of things that they're doing. It's inhumane.
Yeah.
Our prison system and the prison system in the US is inhumane. Yeah.
Yeah. And like usually like in that sense too, there are people that might want to like be a part of that like system, like as like either like a guard or a warden or a police officer. So in your advice, like you ever encountered like someone that wants to be like a part of that system too, like, hey, I wanted to know like what a prison guard is like, or I want to become like, sort of like an officer or someone that kind of has to deal with inmates, would you tell them that it's even worth it to like work for it, or to just to remain by your values and just focus on other like directions?
That's a good question. um I wouldn't oppose the idea, but I would just make them aware of what it is that you're dealing with and the journey that you have to face to do that. Because, there's people that I know that have chosen, to become correctional officers, ones that it's completely changed them and they've walked away from the position, especially in this pandemic. And ones that it has made them a completely different person. Like they're not the same. They don't have the same heart, the same compassion. The same as a police officer. There are some, like I said, there's some great police officers that are really humanizing, and and then there's those that are just not. You know what I mean? So if you're in it for the right purposes and you're in it to actually try to help the people, then I would suggest, do what you feel is best. But if you're in it, I don't know what you're going in it for. If you're in it for a power trip or for authority or just to have a gun or just to, power trip on people, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? But for me, this whole system is broken and it needs to be completely abolished and restructured from the ground up. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah. And even like releasing these like books that you have, and like even like when you made like like various like sales on them, was there ever any like impact that you received from people that like in terms of like recognition, criticism, or so forth?
Not so much as criticism. I've more so got people saying that it was either, like, for example, with the hidden track, it was highly triggering to a lot of women. I found that a lot of for some women, they had to take time from the book, put it down. It brought up a lot of things they experienced in their past. The more so along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And I want to get more into this whole like international like writing workshop that you have. So tell me like how you co-founded that and how that came about, like in that sense.
Well, we started, my publisher and I, Stacy from Kaya Publishing, we started doing urban fiction writing workshops with Toronto Library, which we started that together. And then eventually, I think we started that in 2017. And then we came up with the cultural writing workshop that we were also doing with the Toronto Library, and Jamil Davis, which is a writer from Cleveland. And then him and Stacy decided that we wanted to broaden it out. And that's when we came up with the International Writers Workshop. When the pandemic hit, Stacy had another writer that she knew from Kenya. There was another writer we had from Toronto, and there was another writer that we were connected with from Barbados, and another writer from Jamaica. So we just all pulled together and we created the International Writers Workshop. We started to do a couple of them every 3 months. And then, the Toronto Arts Council recognized it. And then we were able to get it funded. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And then I think you mentioned that you had like an event coming up, with the writers group as well too. So I don't know if you want to tell more about that.
Most definitely. It's the African Diaspora of Culture Burials of the African Diaspora, and that's February 26th. It's going to be on Zoom. There's a registration link in the Toronto Urban Book Expo bio. If you check it out on Instagram, it's TOExpo bio, and you can find the link there. Like I said, it's on February 26th. It's sponsored by the Toronto Arts Council, and it's a writing workshop that will give you all the tools and information you need if you are an actual established writer, an urban writer, or even someone that just wants to get involved in writing.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll mainly like post the link like on YouTube like once it's released. And yeah, I think hopefully everyone can check it out too.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, just getting back, I just had like some freestyle questions that I had too. So with Mississauga right now, like it has completely done like a complete like 360 in terms of gentrification with
Yes.
condos being added and more families like moving in. People that used to live in Toronto are now living in Mississauga, Brampton, everywhere in Peel region. So how do you feel about the gentrification of Mississauga? Do you feel like it has been like a good effect so far, or has it like been like worse like since then?
Mm. For me personally, in Ridge, I think it's bullshit. Like they force businesses that were there for years, especially like in Ridgeby, like Jeannie's Bakery, the restaurant, the corner store that was there for years, the Chinese restaurant, like that was history. I had people like my parents, other people's parents that would go for like hard bread and patties and all them things. Like that was there from we were kids, and they took all of that away like just to build condos. Like I don't know, I think there's certain things that you should not take away from a community, um and they chose to put that in because somebody chose to privately want to build condos for wealth. I don't know, that's just my opinion and view. Yes, we have an economy. Yes, people do need somewhere to live. Yes, though I understand all of that, but there's still history, and there's still yes, those people were able to relocate their businesses in other places and all that stuff, but there was still a community that was there. I still feel the same. Like if I look at like Regent Park and those communities, like okay, they rebuilt the community. Yes, they moved these people into different places where I think was a crock of shit. But a lot of the problems they said it was for, like whether it was drugs and gangs and all this stuff, just moved to another few blocks over. So what did you really clean up?
Yeah, and it's even like evident to like just like speaking about these areas too, because there are like shootings and other instances that happen like
Still
even in these
there.
areas. Yeah. So
It's
there is
still
like
there. Like
yeah.
we didn't clean that up. There's still shootings, and there's still murders around Ridgeway. Like there was just one maybe a month ago where somebody
Yeah,
got killed in the building. Like that, you didn't change any of that. So
yeah,
that what are you cleaning up? But it's more, to me, it's more about money than anything.
yeah,
Doesn't seem like
and
it's about shit else, and they don't really give a shit about the people. So that
yeah.
ain't nothing.
Yeah. And like, even people like that used to like live in Jane and Finch and other areas, like the government would tell them like, hey, in order to gentrify your area, we're gonna have to move you to Mississauga or Brampton. And even these kids, they don't want to like live in these areas too. But then like even when they do, they get caught up in trying their best to have those same like lifestyles and bring it upon like these other people. And sometimes it could be a good effect, sometimes it could be a bad effect depending on the situation too, like if people really are set to like change, or like because like usually like with areas, like moving someone from another area doesn't really change like a person, or just doesn't change the way like there's still issues that are still like internally that happen like in the home and in other instances like too as well. So yeah.
It's very true. And that's another thing that's been happening over the years, dispersing people all over to these different communities. And you know what I mean? And that could also be escalating a lot of the violence in these areas, Mississauga, Brampton, Malton. That's a lot of the issues that, you know what I mean? These people end up having beef in these communities, and then we're having all these shootings that are escalating all over the place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely as well too. And we talked about COVID-19 in that sense too. So and like usually like with how the show came about and with other instances, about addiction, about habits, about everything else too. But like in your opinion, since COVID happened, did you feel like the pandemic has affected the way you tend to proceed with business? And since then, like what were like a lot of changes or tweaks that you had to do in order to like handle your business in a pandemic like this?
Honestly, I won't really say that it's really affected. My business has actually probably made it a bit more successful, to be honest. A lot of things went virtual, and a lot of stuff, everything is like Zoom meetings, and work behind the scenes. So I was still able to execute and do my work behind the scenes. I'm a behind the scenes person, so I was able to still get my work out there. Still, the only thing was that really affected was like getting to do like signings out in bookstores and stuff like that. That affected. But outside for the other my work, like I said, a lot of my work is behind the scenes, so it was still easy. I'm still able to execute. It's just going with the times of everything going to virtual was more of the having to adapt to that in 2020. But I'm learning. So
Yeah. No, I definitely know what you mean too, and and it does have sorry, it has like affected a lot of people, like even like in Toronto too,
yeah,
like just with the music scene, with shows like
huge.
happening, with people that wanted to proceed with traveling, with other stuff going on too,
That
and
part, yeah, it's huge.
uh,
How are you dealing with it? Like,
uh like before the pandemic happened in 2020, I was doing concert photography, just
mm,
covering events, because I was still deciding if I wanted to like pursue more in building the photography platform or working on TLOY. And then like when that pandemic happened, like it had like the craziest change for me, in which I put like more of a 100% focus on just, creating this platform, interviewing a lot of like unique talents and such. And, I had like a lot of great experiences, meeting like a lot of these people, then like, even doing like concert photography, like in that sense too. So I did feel like doing this like was kind of like more worth it, to, building a name, to sharing these stories, to sharing how people view these like certain things too. And this is just like an overall question. How do you feel about the Toronto like scene like so far? Like not even like just with music, but just with the culture, with everything going on, like just like even like the GTA too, just with everything going on. Do you feel like it's good the way it is, or do you feel like there has to be like some change?
oh, that's such a loaded question. There definitely has to be, for me personally and from my perspective, some change. I think Toronto needs to support each other. Like everybody needs to come out here and support each other. If you're doing music, if you're doing art, if whatever you're doing in this Toronto entertainment, music, art, business, entrepreneur industry, everybody needs to support what everybody is doing for the city to build up and rise, whether it's the film industry, whatever it is. This whole hating, blocking, clicky, whatever the hell it is that's out here, that bullshit needs to stop. Like people seriously need to help each other win. It's been around for a long period of time, and these people have these little clicky circles, and everybody wants to just block this person. I'm not helping this person. I'm not doing this for this person. That person's not my friend. Shit talking, the fake, whatever's going on out here. People need to stop that bullshit. We're in 2022, spread love. And if you can help somebody to excel further, do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's room for everybody to eat something off everybody else. We're in a planet, a universe, there's abundance. Eat. You know what I mean? Why are you worried about somebody else's purpose and gift? They're not you, you know?
Yeah.
So
No
that's
doubt.
just my perspective on that. There's room for everybody to get out here, help each other.
Yeah, I definitely like agree like in that sense too. And like, I also have like these two other things to add to. I do feel like with the Toronto scene, right now, I think one major issue that people really don't talk about is, the people that, were getting like abused in some way, shape, or form. And, it was evident in like 2018 when this page called like Toronto Abusers, GTA Abusers, like came out and exposed the people that were committing like these certain acts too. And I do feel like in certain cases there has to be like accountability, like with the people that had like done these like things before too, and just showing like exposing like these certain people to that have done wrong, so in order to make a safe community. Because
That
right
too.
now,
Very sure.
like right now, I don't feel like there is like a safe space like yet for many people to come out, because I do feel like in this city, like just Toronto and GTA in general, it's just only shed like only through one light when there's a lot of like creative lights that come into play. But then with enablers, with people who do the abuse too, that kind of like overtake that step and try to harm the people, like that problem like is still gonna manifest even to a point where people don't want to interact in these like events or in these like scenes anymore too. So I do feel like accountability and like exposing people who have done wrong is like a good thing, to help the marginalized and the victims as well too. And then as we talked about like in the previous question with the radio with Flow 93.5, I do feel like more outlets need to come forth like in that sense too, to showcase for every talent like that goes on like in the city as well too. So yeah.
Very good point. I totally agree with that. And even to further take that, yeah, there needs to be accountability because a lot of people are, like you said, abusing and bullying and doing all kind of foolishness. And people are not allowed to be who they are and to walk freely. And then taking that a further step, then you have the cancel culture in where we're at as well, where somebody may make a mistake and then everybody's canceling and blocking that person out completely. So that's another thing as well that needs to be addressed as well in this city. Like we need to start somewhere, man, and really people just need to be kind, have compassion, and just really think about how would they want to be treated, and simple shit that I swear we learned when we were children. For us to just proceed as a city, because there's so much talent here. There's so much greatness here. There's so much, artistry, intelligence, business. Like, I swear our city has the potential to be the greatest, and we're blocking ourselves from doing that.
Yeah, nah, definitely. I truly like know what you mean, like in that sense too. And I think one pivotal issue that that is like ringing for everyone right now, like it's been big like throughout time, and it's gun violence in the city, whether you're injured or whether you take one to the head or take one in like a lot of stuff going on. So like in your opinion, how do you feel like that gun violence in the GTA or just like even in the city of Toronto can be prevented in that sense?
I don't personally promote it, and I don't personally agree with it. I feel like, see, the thing is, okay, there's two sides to it. In the music, for those that are speaking about it, like if you're speaking about your experience of what you've been through, I understand that perspective. Like you've been through it, you've lived this life, and you're just speaking it into your music. You're not speaking it to glamorize it, but you're speaking it because it's something that you lived through. I get that perspective. At the same time, we do have youth, but at the same time, it's not for these artists or rappers to educate these youth. It's a parent's job to pay attention to what your children are listening to. You cannot blame a rapper for that. But I do not promote gun violence. I do not believe that, but I understand that it is in the music. I grew up listening to it. I grew up understanding that, like I said, my first rap tape was NWA. Like I was listening to it. So it does get into the hands of the children. It is in the music. It is in the culture. You know what I mean? We're listening to Migos. They talk about that shit. It's in the music. Yeah. And that's a big rap group. They're everywhere. It's in the music. It's in Drake's music. It's in the music. So are we going to say that, we're not going to listen to these albums? As when it comes to the kids, like I said, that's the parents' responsibility. That's not these rappers' responsibility. That's just my opinion. But I can't really, if a rapper's grown up in this community and that's what they've saw and this is what they're rapping in their music, I don't disagree with that because like in my books, I'm telling a story. And that's the same thing they're doing. Do I believe in them saying, this is the life and this is how you should live and shoot everybody from someone telling that? No, I don't agree with that. I don't.
Yeah. No, I definitely like understand like in that sense too. And as you said too, it starts from home too. And just like even being like in that child's life too, like not just like, not just like, abandoning like them like in that sense too, just like even like taking them out like for a walk too, or
Mhm.
grocery shopping, or just like a simple like coffee shop date, or a sports activity, that could change like that perspective like of that kid's mind
Oh,
to like in that sense to just an engagement in being with the family. But like with technology, with cell phones, with social media too nowadays too,
yeah.
like a lot of kids do get hooked onto it. And I do feel like social media and phones like should be reduced at a certain like capacity, like even like not just like even by age, but by like timing, like maybe just use your phone like maybe, or use the internet like for like maybe like an hour or two a day. It could
That's
definitely change like that child's like mind like in
mhm.
that sense too. So
It's so true. It's
yeah.
so true. But yeah, the gun violence and the gun violence in the city is definitely increased. It's become a lot more. But then, like you said, there's social media, there's internet access. We've have a lot more access to things that we did not have access to back in the day. So that could also be a part of it, and then you have people that are online all over glamorizing things, and also have video games as well. That's also something that um, has definitely increased, and that takes a part in it too. You have a lot of young boys that are playing these video games and shooting off people's face, and that also takes a part of it, I think, as well. Um, so it's definitely something, but it's like, where do we start with all of these things at once?
Uh, no, no doubt. I think, usually it's just more like one by one, just realize like what the main issue is, like what if it's the most severe issue like right now, kind of like stop it like immediately, and then like everything else to, take time, understand like how it can affect someone, and that change will sort of like become like gradual like in that sense too. And even like having like after school programs, or just programs that reinforce good behavior, good activity, like positive like energy too, like it definitely like helps in the long run of like kids, and like even like adults too nowadays, to not get caught up in like a field like this, so
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like I've heard sometimes, like parents have conversations and they're like, um, but they'll have the buts of, okay, but I'm working a 60-hour week, and I where do I have the time? And where da, 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 da. So there's the challenges all around. And that's it. Like I said, it's this system of working 60-hour weeks, and then you got to come home and be a parent, and then you can't watch everything your parents are doing, you can't watch everything your child doing, and then you got the internet and the media with all the propaganda, and then you got the system that's like it's all around, and like that's why I was saying, like, the system seriously needs to change on
yeah,
how it's operating.
yeah, definitely too. What are your plans like for this year, like aside from the event coming up like later like this month, and other projects and so forth? And do you have any like final words you would like to say for any creative, or any or any person out there pursuing their dreams?
Most definitely. Well, I'll be doing a couple more. Well, not a couple. I'll be working on some more events and stuff like that coming up. I'll be doing some speaking engagements, some more workshops. I actually created a new workshop that's coming up. It's called Find Your Voice. I'll be doing an art exhibit um, for my books with Mysium Toronto and Confinement Contingent. That's coming up in April. Um, and what I will say to any of the creatives that are out there, follow your path, follow your purpose, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't. Always believe in yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely a good right there.